Hello and good morning. It's been a while since I've done one of these. I feel like the last time we talked about what we're going to be talking about, they had yet to announce all the titles for the Mega Drive Mini 2, and now it's all out of the bag. So let's talk about that. But first, I want to talk about some big news that dropped last week or over the weekend. I don't remember. But yeah, here we go. On August 19th, it was announced that Space Channel 5 and Comic Zone would be receiving film adaptations. And if you've been following Sega movie news outside of the Sonic movies that have been dropping, we have been getting like news like this for, it must be like 8 or 9 years now. So there's been stories in the past. I think back in 2014 that Sega was working with a company called Stories International to basically make TV shows or movies based around properties like Rise of Nightmares, which is kind of odd. Like, why don't you just make House of the Dead? But maybe they felt like the IP was kind of tainted by the Yui Bowl film. There was also talk of Crazy Taxi, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage. And as time went on, we had more concrete news about I don't remember off the top of my head, but someone involved with the John Wick movies was interested in making a Streets of Rage movie. That was more recent. And this is the most recent news in terms of non-Sonic films that are expected to be coming out. And what makes this different from some of the news we've had previously is that this seems very much a go. Like, we actually have creatives listed. It's not like they're shopping around, but they actually have people involved with this. So who are they? Well, the Hollywood Reporter talked about it, and the Space Channel 5 movie, it's being written by Barry Battles, which is not me, and then Nur Piniri, and it says here that Battles wrote and directed the 2012 crime comedy The Baytown Outlaws, which starred Billy Bob Thornton and Ava Longoria, and Piniri wrote and directed the sci-fi drama Extracted. So they have a little bit of industry experience, but much like the Sonic movie, Jeff Fowler, the director of that, he only had experience directing one short film years prior, and prior to that, he's just done CG work. So, as far as their, backlog of projects that they've worked on, it's pretty light. I haven't heard great things about these movies. I haven't even heard of these movies, but people who have voiced an opinion said they were okay. Meanwhile, Comic Zone is being written by May Catt, and her credits include writing on Young Justice and the How to Train Your Dragon spin-off series. And she also wrote for Transformers War for Cybertron trilogy, which is interesting because I think the showrunner for that is actually a friend of a friend. So I'm I'm wondering if I can get her on a podcast. That would be interesting. But regardless, I would say I'm actually feeling better about the Comic Zone one just because it seems like the writer behind it clearly has writing experience. These look like popular franchises. I think Comic Zone is actually a very good concept for a movie just because you can have a struggling comics artist who gets sucked into his comic book, and you can either do like a kind of hyper comic book sort of look like Dick Tracy, or I'm blanking on the name, but it was that I think Robert Rodriguez movie inside the comic, that black and white comic book. Man, I'm blanking on it, but you know what I'm talking about. But alternatively, they could do a animated film, which would be very Roger Rabbit of them. My only concern is that, as we've seen with recent 2D animated projects, they typically go for CG with like cell shading, which I think would be pretty crummy for a Comic Zone movie. But we'll have to wait and see. They also mentioned that the producer from Sega, who is attached to both these movies, also worked on the Sonic movies, and it's attached to Sonic Prime. So clearly, Sega has someone in-house who is going to be attached to all of these projects, which I've heard some people say, oh, it's going to be a Sega cinematic universe and we'll have a big crossover movie. I don't think that's going to happen, but it doesn't mean we can't have like Sonic references, like actual references to Sega properties within these movies. Like, I don't know, it'd be kind of fun to have like a Sega arcade machine in Comic Zone, or have, I don't know, like some sort of weird Sonic cameo in Space Channel 5. So, cautiously optimistic. It seems like these are a go. Like I mentioned, previous projects were more like being shopped around or workshopped, whereas these ones, they clearly have creatives lined up. I've seen some people complain about, oh, like, I don't know what Space Channel 5 is. I don't know what Comic Zone is. Well, that's just you, because these are pretty big franchises for their time, and they definitely have a fan base. I mean, Space Channel 5 alone is probably the top 3 or 4 Dreamcast titles that, you know, like Ulala herself is an iconic character, great design, great music. The games themselves are not great in my opinion. I actually remember the build up and hype for Space Channel 5, and then when we got it, we're like, man, the video's like not in sync, and it's actually really difficult. Like, it's cool, music's great, graphics are fun, but yeah, this is kind of a flawed game. So I honestly think it's Ulala and the music and just kind of the concept of this space reporter that really is the strongest aspect to Space Channel 5, and I think they could definitely carry that over to a film. Next bit of news. This is a fun one. So I actually have this on the way in the mail. So this is a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 soundtrack, which is releasing to audio cassette. They also have the first movie being repressed on vinyl. I guess this company has released it in the past. So you can see here the tape's really cool. It's got this UV printed shell with a little slipcover that looks like the Sonic 2 cover art, which we've seen with the 4K Blu-ray release of the film. It's limited 250 copies. It's only $14.99, which I think is a good price. It's, you know, it's kind of a gimmick, but let's actually see. Let's see if it's in stock anymore. It is in stock, so they probably have a little under half left. So if you want to pick that up, it's $14.99. You know, I mean, cassette tapes they don't sound great, but it's kind of fun to have them on cassette, and I think the artwork's really cool. This is fun too. It's a repressing of the first film's soundtrack. Me personally, I found the scores to both films to be lacking, kind of unmemorable, but and you know, it also kind of annoys me that we don't have the end credits music on these, but of course that's because different artists, they probably have to pay them even more, and to my memory, I don't think either of the 2 end credits songs for the Sonic movies actually had physical releases. So kind of a shame that's not happening here, but still, you know, if you're a Sonic movie fan or collector, definitely pick these up. You can see behind me here I have a pretty sizable Sonic 2 movie collection. I'm not a big fan of the Sonic movie 1 like merchandise, and I think the movie itself's okay, but I absolutely love the stuff they were putting out for 2, so you know, they got me. Now let's get to the main event. So the big news that dropped, again on the 19th, it was a big news day, was the complete lineup for the Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Mini 2 lineup. And I learned my lesson last time. I did not post anything, I did not tweet anything until Sega made all their big dumps, because in the past they would like announce some games, and then over on Twitter they'd be like, oh, and also we're making a Genesis Mini, and I just had to play catch up with the news. But here they did a live stream in the morning revealing the last games for the Mega Drive Mini 2, and then they dropped a trailer for the Genesis 2, and it's a 6-minute trailer. I'm not going to play it here. I'm not going to do a whole pause talk through. That's going to take like 30 minutes, but the titles that they announced, the final titles for the Mega Drive Mini 2, were actually kind of cool. I think the big ones are the new games, the unreleased games. So we've had, of course, you know, existing Mega Drive games. There's a lot of shmups. There's a lot of unique and interesting RPGs that obviously will not be ported over to the Genesis Mini 2. But there are some cool games that have never been released. They're either arcade games that M2 years ago ported to the Genesis just for fun. Like, I love that they do these ports just for fun, and they sit on them, and they're like, oh, we can include this in, like, like a 3D Classics or Sega Ages or a plug-and-play console. And so here, the new games are, and we'll actually jump over to the Japanese website. So first up, it's Versus Puyo Puyo Sun, which is a Mega Drive port of the Saturn game, but it's only the Versus mode. So there is no AI, there's no story mode. It's pretty light, and I've heard some people complain about that, but to be quite honest, it's a bonus game they're throwing on there, so you get a brand new Puyo Puyo game, even if it's just, player versus player. So that's a fun bonus. Also, this one threw a lot of people off. They didn't realize what this was. So Space Harrier 2 obviously was on the previous Mega Drive Mini 2, and it was a launch title I believe in Japan, definitely in America. But what they did here was they actually rebuilt Space Harrier 2 in the Space Harrier 1 sort of, I guess, engine. So it plays a lot more like a classic Space Harrier game. It's less janky. It's very smooth, but they retain the music, and I'm very excited to play this one because Space Harrier 2 has been a game I always want to play, but when I sit down to play it, I'm like, it's kind of janky. I'd rather be playing Space Harrier 1. And speaking of Space Harrier 1, they've actually done the same for that. Space Harrier 1 never had a Mega Drive version. There was a 32X port. So this one, it will feel like a downgrade from the 32X, but it will feel like an upgrade from what one would expect from Space Harrier running on the Genesis back in the day. So that's going to be cool. This one's really cool, and I have to jump back to get the name because I can't read Japanese. But this one is called... What is it called? It's called Devi and P, or Pi. And this game was actually a game from Takashi Iizuka. And Takashi Iizuka made this game before he worked on Sonic 3. I think it was like an internal project, just him kind of testing his skills. Maybe there was a plan to release it officially, but it never happened. So yeah, you get, Yuji Naka, people always point to Girls Garden on the Master System. So here we have Devi and P from Takashi Iizuka. And look at these guys. They look like little Chow. That's interesting, right? So I'm looking forward to that. Super Locomotive is a game I've never heard of, and that was an arcade game back in '82, I believe, and they are porting it. They have ported it. They did this work actually years ago, and they didn't know what to do with this, little fun side project they did, but now it's here. So it's a new port of a game, and it looks really fun. If you remember in the past, I talked about some other new ports that they did, including that little tricycle game. I played that recently at arcades. That's a really fun game, so I'm looking forward to that one as well. There's 2 quiz games here which will not make the jump to the Genesis Mini, which is a shame, and I will get into some of the shames I have about the Genesis Mini too. But so Mega Q was a quiz game way back in the day that was not super popular. I think it was kind of a joke game, I feel like, and then it kind of gained popularity over the years. I believe internally some of the guys at M2 and I believe Sega were big fans of this game, and I'm blanking. I think it was one of the M2 employees or Sega employees, last things he did before he retired was writing out all the questions for the Sega Q game. And what is this? Well, it's a reskin of Mega Q, but with Takenobu Mitsuyoshi, who does the Daytona music and appears in a lot of the Sega streams, as the he plays the game show host, and you answer, I believe it's like 2,000 Sega questions. Really wild. You can see some of the screenshots here. So, there's absolutely no way I'll be able to play this, but I'm looking forward to at least, clicking through it and checking out the graphics and stuff. And who knows, maybe some, savvy fans will actually translate it. Here's hoping. The other one is Mega Q 2022, which is just updated questions for the modern era using the Mega Q game engine. Some Mega CD games were also announced. You can see them here. Obviously, these two are not going to be making the jump to the Genesis Mini, but there is Night Trap. As for the Genesis Mini, they did announce Sewer Shark, which is not going to appear on the Mega Drive Mini 2, and To my knowledge, that is the only exclusive Sega CD game on the Genesis Mini 2 that is not on the Mega Drive Mini 2. And you can click on over to segabits.com. You can read the whole post here. I spent a good deal of time listing out every single title that is on the Mega Drive Mini 2, as well as denoting the ones in bold that are exclusive to the Mega Drive Mini 2, putting asterisks next to the ones that will play in the English version if you change the language settings on the console itself. And then I also denoted the special content, which are new or unreleased games that are new to the console. So in total, the Mega Drive Mini 2 will include 63 titles. 43 of those will be Mega Drive games. 20 of those will be Mega CD games. And of the Mega Drive games, 10 of them are new or unreleased. So I think that's a huge upgrade from the Mega Drive Mini 1, Sega Genesis Mini 1, which from my memory, the new or unreleased games included Tetris, and I want to say there was a new Fantasy Zone, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's this one. Let me see. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yeah, so Fantasy Zone is on this one. So the first one, it was, I believe, Tetris, and then the English translation of Monster World 4? I don't know. But this is a huge step up, I think. Now, the unfortunate thing is that, now let's look at the Genesis Mini 2. There are 61 titles. 49 of them are Sega Genesis games compared to the 43 Mega Drive games on the Mega Drive Mini 2. So you're getting more Mega Drive or Genesis games than Mega Drive games. Obviously, a lot of the Japanese ones are being replaced, especially the RPGs and the quiz games. But what they did not do is they did not replace the Sega CD games. So, as you can see here, there is 12 Sega CD games, whereas 20 Mega CD games. And a lot of the omissions are, for example, this Captain Tsubasa, which is a sports game based on I believe, a manga. There's also some odd ones, like Columns 3 could have been over there, but it wasn't, even though it had an English release, and the English version will be on the Mega Drive Mini 2. I do not believe Denon Aleste will be on there. You can see here, both Lunar games, Eternal Blue and the Silver Star, will not be on the Genesis. This one, Silky Lip, which looks like a wacky sort of RPG, will not be on it, but that makes sense. Both of the Party Quiz games, Popful Mail, which I think is a big omission, again, from the Genesis Mini 2. And then, yeah, we do, and let me check the comments here. So it is mentioned that Darius was on the Mega Drive Mini 1 and Genesis Mini 1. And then we have some big love for Clay Fighter, but that's sarcastic. And yes, so what it is this Denon Aleste game is and I don't know if I'm saying it right, guys, I'm sorry, is Robo Aleste, but on the Mega Drive Mini 2, they have both versions, whereas on the Genesis Mini 2, there's only Robo Aleste, and it has yet to be confirmed if you change it to Japanese, if it plays the Japanese version of that game. That'd be cool. I don't know how different they are. But yes, going back to the Lunar games and the Popful Mail, of course, it's working designs that is causing that issue. And the rights holder for that, I believe it's one guy who owns the rights to... It's one guy who owns the rights to the audio, but not the translation. So they could, mute the audio, but then I think that breaks the game or something like that. So I don't know, it's just kind of a shame because, they really pushed that this plays Sega CD games, but in America, we're only getting a dozen of them. And let's quickly run through those dozen. So it's Echo the Dolphin 2, which are both solid titles. They're my preferred versions. I think Tides of Time has some of the best music, especially the time travel one, the one that goes... That's fun. Mansion of Hidden Souls, decent game. It's a good little, I guess, point and click sort of adventure game. Night Striker, Night Trap, which I've heard some people shit talk Night Trap being on this, but I think it needs to be on this because to not represent FMV games on the Sega CD would be a crime. It would be like rewriting history. There is also Robo Aleste. There is Shining Force CD, which I think is a cool addition here. There is Sonic CD, which will be playable both in Japanese and English. And we just got in Origins, but I think it's very cool that we're getting a just straight port of the original game, warts and all. I'm wondering how the load times will be. That's going to be interesting. But I'm actually looking forward to that. I think it's going to be cool to just have how it played originally without any 16:9 or, little additions. The Ninja Warriors is a Sega CD game that will be on there. And then, that's kind of it. Nothing's really jumping out at me. And then Sewer Shark is the only Sega CD exclusive. So, it's good, not great. I honestly think the Mega Drive Mini 2 has a better lineup, and I am picking up both of these, but to be honest, I don't know how much I'll be playing the Genesis Mini 2 just because I'd rather play Mega Drive Mini 2, and almost every single game that I want to play has an English version, or I'll manage with the Japanese one, like Popful Mail I'm looking forward to playing again. But yeah, so, sound off in the comments what your thoughts are on those lineups. I will, I'll share your thoughts in a moment as I just click through a few more pieces of news that dropped this week. So this is really cool. So this is a canceled Game Boy Color to Dreamcast connectivity solution. And there's a fantastic video we have linked here. The video creator and the one who discovered this information actually reached out to us asking if we could news it. And our newest contributor to the site, Big Elk, actually wrote up a really nice write-up here. So you can watch the video, read the write-up. I'm not going to get too into it, but essentially there was an English fan translation of the Game Boy Color game Sakura Wars GB. Go forth, young cadet. And as they were working on that, they found that there were plans for a Game Boy Color connectivity solution with the Dreamcast. And again, you can read through this. I'm not going to go through the whole story, but essentially it was going to be a link cable, or I should say a scanner attached to the side of the Game Boy Color, which was usually used for the multiplayer link cable, and it would scan the TV screen for special barcodes that would appear at certain points during the Sakura Wars Dreamcast remake, and then would unlock special content. And that's just wild. I love the idea of scanning the TV screen. I like that it uses an existing port for something new. Kind of reminds me of how the Dreamcast controller would, hook up to a microphone or a headset, using what they have for something new and innovative. But it never happened. But it's a really cool write-up here. Check it out. Also watch the video. I love those little lost tech developments that never came to be, especially when it comes to Sega and Nintendo working together. Now, we did have some connectivity between Sonic team games and the Game Boy Advance on the GameCube, but this would have been really wild in the Dreamcast era to have that happening. And then lastly, Game Gear, Master System, and SG-1000 games are playable on the Analog Pocket Open FPGA. If that's your thing, you can check it out. We have the information on the site. I'm all for making these games continuing to be accessible, playable. To my knowledge, the Analog Pocket is sold out, so I don't know. But regardless, very cool. And then, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I guess I will. Finally, there were some supposed Sonic 3 movie plot points and characters that were revealed. And since then, Sonic fan site Tales Channel claims that the information is not... So they said the synopsis was incorrect and not indicative of Paramount's current plans for the upcoming theatrical release. And I saw people jump on this going, oh, it was false information. But my take, and I wrote about this in the article, is that, movies are always changing, developing, and so I assume that this is actually information that was correct at a certain point, and now the plot to the movie, characters may have shifted. It also might be deflecting from a leak, because this information did come from a weekly newsletter called Production Weekly, not like some wacky Sonic fan site. So this is, new information that's coming from a Hollywood source that has zero reason to make fan fiction up. In fact, I bet the person writing this doesn't even know who Big the Cat is. So spoiler alert, if this actually comes to be, the official synopsis was, with Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles having defeated Robotnik and his badniks, Green Hills was saved, but it wasn't over yet. The team will have to face Robotnik's grandfather has created the Shadow Project. And I don't understand how the synopsis could be incorrect, given that's exactly what Sonic 2 sets up at the end of the movie. Like, if the movie is not about that, what the hell is it about if you're not having the Shadow Project and Shadow and Robotnik seemingly defeated? That's exactly what they set up. Another interesting bit they have here is that Robotnik collected the Chaos Emeralds, which we did see were inside the Master Emerald, which I believe was Takashi Iizuka's idea to kind of simplify things. But those emeralds floated away. That was confirmed in the novelization. We actually had Kyle Fegley come on, who wrote both Sonic movie novelizations, so he's going from the script. Very cool. Another bit is that Robotnik uses the emeralds to create a metallic version of Sonic, which I'd love to see. I know some people have said, oh, this is turning into like Sonic CD meets Sonic Adventure 2, but I'd love to see that. I think that would be awesome. The ring portals will come back. We've seen Tails and Knuckles come into Sonic's place on Earth in Green Hills, and now we're going to be seeing Amy and Big joining the lineup, which would be awesome. And then finally, Sonic and Friends team up against Robotnik to save the world, which, I mean, if the movie is not about that, then what could it be about? So, yeah, people are disputing that, but it's, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say grain of salt because it came from a Hollywood source, not some, like, supersonic SSF 69, or something like that. Let's check the comments here. So we have Bail Factor saying, do we have a price on the Mini 2? We do. It's a little over $100, and I know that seems like a lot. There's some super informative translations from GSK on Twitter. If you don't follow him, check him out. Just search GSK Mega Drive Mini, and you'll find all his tweets. And he's been doing a lot of translations of interviews with M2 and Sega. And essentially what it is that to get the Mega CD games to play, they had to boost the memory from something like 8 gigabytes, I want to say, something crazy, to have the games run smoothly. And because of the part shortages, memory increase, it's just pushed the price of the mini console up. So I personally actually bought it from Ebten's Sega store because I wanted to get all those little tchotchkes, which I missed out on the first Genesis Mini. And since then, and I have them sitting here, I can't show them, but I've got the whole Astro City Mini and Astro City Mini V next to me with all the little bonuses. And like, as someone who would, kill for a new Sega console, this is the next best thing. So I'm going to go all out. Like, if they're going to sell me like little plastic fiddly bits to like put inside my Genesis or in my Mega Drive, I'll buy it because it's physical Sega stuff. You don't get that anymore. Let's see what else we have. Oh yeah, Skill Gem says, I'm grabbing both units too. I do like the differences in software as it gives more games overall, which is great, but I agree the Japanese model seems more exciting. Yeah, I mean, if you're a completionist like I am, I think both of them are well worth getting. But if you're like on the fence with which one to get, I would import the Mega Drive Mini 2 just because it has more unreleased and new games, and it has more Sega CD games, even if you're missing out on Sewer Shark, which, to be quite honest, I'm a big fan of the FMV games, and there is a one man who's working on FMV ports of all the Digital Pictures titles. Screaming Villains is the company. We've had him on our podcast in the past, and he is basically on a mission to port every single Sega CD FMV game. And the next one is actually Kids on Site, which was an April Fool's joke, but it's happening. So Sewer Shark is going to happen, I'm certain. And if you get them from Limited Run Games, the long boxes that they're releasing are just like chef's kiss. I love those. Let's see, any other comments before we get to the beef? Oh yeah, Eb10 is a wallet killer. Yeah, well, I've been doing Eb10 through a proxy service, and those proxy shipping rates have gone up. Like it was $60 to ship my Astro City Mini V, which is like half the price of what I spent on it. So shit. So the beef. So this is a recurring segment where I save my complaints for the end of the show, because in the past I would get a little complainy. So what is my beef? Well, I don't have much beef today, but I do have to comment on Sonic fans on Twitter, which I know is like obviously we've been talking about Sonic fans on Twitter for, it feels like, since Twitter opened their doors. But I am seeing people who are like obsessed with news being dropped every day, and they get upset when like Sonic Frontiers information's not coming out to them on a daily basis, and they're not getting information on release dates and movie details and things like that. And it's just like, you got to step away from your fandom for a little bit, or find new fandoms, because you cannot survive on a daily dose of Sonic information, especially if you're like not a fan of the comics and you're not a fan of the movies and you just want game information. Another beef I have is Sonic fans who act like they all of a sudden are like Hollywood, like Hollywood insider, like, I don't know, experts, because I've seen people going, "What? It's so weird how we have a release date for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the movie, and yet the game doesn't have a release date. That's a problem." It's like, no, that's how the film industry works. What they do is they plant their flag, and they say the movie's going to release in 2 or 3 years at this time, and it tells other studios to either, get away if they're afraid of Sonic, which I think they should be, because Sonic actually, does really well at the box office. And it also just gives them like something to promote, because right now there's very little internally with Sonic, probably outside of some very early script drafts and some casting. And so the release date for movies, it's kind of a newish thing, but it's been going on for the past, I feel, decade, where they've been announcing movies years in advance. I mean, hell, Disney will just say there's a Star Wars movie in 3 years, there's a Marvel movie in 4 years, and they don't even tell you what it is. But again, it's to plant their flag, to tell people what, give some sort of information for people. And then, I don't know, last bit, I don't really want to comment on it too much, but there are some YouTubers out there, and I don't consider myself a YouTuber, more like just, I guess Sega called me a content creator, so I have to wear that badge of shame. But they get all grumpy about that RGT guy with the hat, and he goes, in his thumbnail, and it's like, Sega messed up. What did they do with the Mega Drive Mini 2? And it's like, calm the fuck down. It's entertainment. It's fun shit. Like, I don't know. I'm not happy that there's not many great Sega CD games on the Genesis Mini 2, but I'm not gonna like make an angry thumbnail about that. Like, calm down. Like, there's worse things going on in the world. Chill out. And I think that's the beef. That's the beef for now. Last bit, I just wanted to tease this. I'm going to be posting this up on the, I don't know if you can see it. Oh, it's really hard to see. There we go. This is the script for Sonic Underground's Friend or Foe, which is Knuckles' first Western appearance in animation. This is the full script. It also has the line count, so the cast breakdown, how many lines they have in the script. I have to assume this script was owned by someone in the recording studio, keeping track of how many lines each character has. Maybe for scheduling or planning, but you can see right here, Knuckles is mentioned, and it's the full script. There's some really interesting little descriptives here. I mean, it's not like Pulp Fiction when it comes to script writing, but there's some fun little mentions of what Knuckles looks like, which is completely off. Like, I think they call him like orange. But I'm gonna be scanning this. I'm going to be putting a watermark on it just because I don't want people printing it and then trying to resell it as an official script. I'm usually against watermarks, but in this case, like, I don't want people to be scammed, because scripts themselves are photocopied, so someone could very well take my files, print them out, and then trick someone down the line. I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to be putting these up first to the Sega Bits Patreon, and then like a couple weeks later, I'm going to be putting it on the Sonic Retro Wiki. I'll talk to those guys, see if they're cool with the watermark, explain myself. But I want to get this out there. There's a lot of Sonic stuff out there that people aren't seeing, and I don't like when people sit on stuff, so I'm going to be putting this out there to the public. It's just a fun read. It's a fun little slice of Sonic, and especially Knuckles' history. And I'd love to collaborate. There's a dude in Chicago who, I guess he like wants to make a video game museum, and I always wanted to get in touch with him because I know him. He wrote, I think, an Art of Atari book recently, but I want to collaborate with him on a Knuckles like mini pop-up museum, because I've got so many. I realized I have so many cool like moments in Knuckles' history, like official comic art of him meeting his father, official comic art of his glove off for the first time, and then of course this script. And I think, I don't know, that's just a thought I have. Or maybe I'll just make a display behind me and call it like the Knuckles Museum, and if you're in town, you can come and see it. But that'll be it. And it's really great to be doing these again. I've taken a long break, mainly because there was like someone in my family would be sick every week, or I was taking a vacation. And then on top of that, I have to do the Sonic Origins review, which Sega has been, they emailed me and they're like, are you doing the review? And I'm like, well, you sent it late, and now I have to wait for the patch. Otherwise, do you want to get a lower score? Because that Tails glitch with him not following you was, to me, inexcusable, because Sonic 2 is my favorite game, and it's like broken. Like, are you kidding me? No. So I'm not reviewing that until I get my hands on it and really play the new patched version. So without further ado, I will see you again maybe later this week, because there is a lot of Sonic Frontiers information dropping. But until then, stay safe. I don't have a sign-off yet. So, welcome to the next level, gamers. Bye.